I'm going to do this video on Carter AFB accelerator pump systems. I see a lot of guys post on forums are having huge problems with the accelerator pump system not properly working on these Carter AFBs. This is from a 64 Pontiac 389. The system is pretty simple. You know, we'll start at the over by the fuel bowl. Down there, I don't know if you guys can see it, where my finger is. Let me come around this way. There's a threaded hole here, and this check valve, what it is, it's a ball inside a little cage, and when there's pressure pushed against it this way, it seals, and when there's no pressure, the ball rolls back and allows fuel to fill up the accelerator pump well. Here, the passage connects over to here. Now you want to make sure that this ball seals when the accelerator pump pushes down, that the ball seals forward so no fuel is coming back into the bowl area. If you're pushing fuel back in the bowl area, you can't build any pressure in your accelerator pump system. You know, usually these things can be cleaned with carburetor cleaner and stuff, and you can blow on one end of them. I just blew on it. I can't move any air through that from the rear forward, so that it'll be a good seal. The second thing is these bores on the AFBs are different. You know, some models, you know, Pontiac and Cadillac, they use like a 3/4 bore. Some of the other ones use 11/16. I have a snap gauge. I measure the bores with a dial indicator, and I'll show you that. This is just a typical snap gauge. These things are cheap. You can get them at Harbor Freight. You know, they compress, and it's got a little locking screw on the back. So I stick it down in the bore, get it squared up, tighten this up, and then I'll measure this with my caliper. So this is 0.747. You know, 7.50 is 3/4 of an inch, close enough. If it's 11/16, you're going to get a different reading. So it's very important you determine that you have the right accelerator pump for the application. And also there is a length difference on these pumps. Overall length of the pump when the spring is installed, from this flat part here, not this part sticking out, but this flat part to here. It's specific to your application. One of the best suppliers I know out there for these parts, for the AFB, and a lot of data on that, is Mike's Carburetor. You'll go to his website. His kits are more money than you're going to see people selling them for on eBay, but he always gives you what you need for that specific application. You know, it's like you get what you pay for world. So this carburetor came to me. The guy wanted a full-blown restoration, but he had it rebuilt. I don't know if he did it himself or whatever. And when I get the carburetor back, the parts in it were like kind of brand new, and I'm checking, and the first thing right out of the gate, it has an 11/16 accelerator pump, too small for the bore. And also there's a couple springs for the carburetor. This one here is like the compression spring. you know, they call it a delay spring. And you can always tell these because they're a little smaller curly Q at the top and the bottom, and they're a pretty tough spring. So when that, I'll put it on the correct. This is the pump we want to use, as a 3/4. So that small end goes to the top. You can press it down, and you put your little retainer clip on there. And that's the setup. The return spring, you can see, is kind of a light spring. Well, when I received the carburetor, somebody had put the delay spring in the well. So what's going to happen is this is going to try to push against this real heavy spring, and it's just going to get to a point where it's going to stop, and then the delay spring is going to take over. See, as it'll move, and the pump quit moving. So you know, make sure you've got the proper spring. And if you go to Mike's website, he sells all this stuff. All this stuff usually comes in his kit. But you make sure you got the right return spring. It's a light spring. It just needs to push the pump back up. It doesn't have to, you know, be super strong. And you just want to make sure you can test it, push it down, make sure you can bottom that thing out without that delay spring moving. Next thing, the nozzle. This is a nozzle. They've got two different types. This one here, if you can see, it's got an open space between this turret in the center. Well, the actual squirt holes are in the turret, and they squirt through that void into those tubes. The other ones, they sealed all that and just drilled their small orifice, because that orifice in the turret is a lot smaller than this tube. And you want to make sure, because it gets fed through the bottom here, comes up, goes out through the turret, little hole, squirts through these pipes in there. You want to make sure that you go through those orifices in the turret with a small wire and carb cleaner, and if you'll be able to look down this hole and see your wire entering it, then you'll know it's nice and clear. Same thing goes true on the circuit. This is your circuit exit from the accelerator well. Comes up, goes into this hole, and then out the little squirters. You want to make sure, you know, you go in there with carburetor cleaner and you're spraying it and cleaning it, and make sure you got a good, nice, clean flow back. Yeah, my camera shuts off. It's like on a time thing. It's just a little Nikon Coolpix. But I think I left off on to make sure that you know, this is your feed hole from your accelerator pump up to the nozzle, and you know, to go down here with carburetor cleaner and make sure you got a good clean flow back through the orifice that feeds. You know, it comes up. See it through the casting. You can look at the casting how it comes up and feeds your outlet. Make sure that's, you know, very clean, no obstructions. And there's a like a check valve pintle. Some of them, you know, like the later ones, it might even been the Edelbrock's. I think the AVS carburetors used a little ball and a spring in here. Most of these old AFBs I see, they all use this pintle type weight, and what that does is it goes down into your discharge hole. You know, you're not going to be able to see it in the camera, and there's a seat down there. And what this does is it sits on that seat and makes a seal. When the accelerator pump puts pressure, it'll lift that needle off of the seat and then allow the fuel to come up through the nozzles. And the reason they have this check ball in here is they want to be able to hold the fuel up in this chamber as close to the nozzle so that you don't have like an air void, because if this wasn't in there, the fuel level is going to fall back down to whatever the level is in the fuel bowl, which will be lower. So you hit your accelerator pump, first you're pushing air out before the fuel can come out. So they put this system in to hold the fuel up here, and it won't last forever, but while you're driving the car, it'll keep the fuel up there. You're working the throttle on and off and stuff. And this is, to me, is kind of heavy for the accelerator pump to overcome it. So what I do on them is I take them and I take about a third of the length off of these. You can see that. I take about a third of the length off. I just file them down. I put it in my vise. I file them down. I get rid of the burrs. And it actually, it does improve the fuel shot, because you're not lifting such a heavy mass out of the way for the fuel to come up. And it actually seals better. It holds the fuel longer in the well than the full length one. And the only thing I'm figuring is this thing is kind of top heavy, and there is a little clearance. It can wiggle around in that hole just a bit. And I think what happens is it's so top heavy that it wants to cock it a little, left to right. And the fuel will start leaking back into the accelerator pump system very slowly. I mean, it'll work, but it seems like this one here holds the fuel twice as long as the long one. And plus, like I say, you've reduced the mass weight of this, so the accelerator pump doesn't have to work as hard to lift it off its seat. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to assemble this, and you guys should do the same thing. And what I do is I use a one of these squeezy balls, and actually what this thing is it's an enema ball. I got it at Walmart some years ago, and because I used to have a real fuel ball they used for model airplanes, and it finally deteriorated, and they wanted something like $35 for another one. So I seen this enema ball at Walmart, and I bought it, and I said, hey, if it was only $6-7. I says, if it works, fine. If it doesn't, I'll throw it out, and I'll have to buck up to $35. But it's fuel proof. I guess that stuff coming out of your butt is toxic, so they must make it fuel proof. I rig my own hose and a little squirter on here. So what I do is I fill the ball up, and I'll fuel up this bowl, to about the level it should be, and then I'll just put my return spring in and take my accelerator pump, and I'll work this system manually to make sure it's working before I put the top on and all this stuff and find out I've got a problem. I can make sure that the pump is working correctly before I seal the top up and everything. So let me fuel that up and we'll continue. Okay, what we've done is I've put some fuel in the bowl, and you'll also notice there's a slot here. That slot extends into the bowl area, and the fuel will actually enter into this chamber also, but your check ball down there will allow fuel to keep going into this accelerator pump chamber, even if that level drops. Like if you're under a full throttle mode, this fuel level is going to go down, and there's just going to be a constant flow of fuel coming in. And if you back off the accelerator pump, you've got fuel in that well, not depending on this slot they have there. And you got to make sure when you're checking your accelerator pump, like the installation height, you want it below that slot, because usually it's about level with the top of the car, but it's going to be the install. You want to make sure it's below that slot, otherwise it's just going to push fuel back into the bowl. So what we're going to do is get some fuel up to our pintle area. You see it came up there. Now you see I backed off the accelerator pump, and you can see the fuel is still there. So what I've got is my chamber is all full of fuel, so when I hit the accelerator pump again, I'm not pushing air from the system. See, just squirts up. And like I say, I've tested it, timed it versus the long one, and this thing will hold fuel twice as long as this tall one. And like I say, the only thing I can figure, it's top heavy and it's cocking a little and not making a good seal. So what I'll do now is I'll install the squirters, and we'll give it a test. Okay, I've got the nozzles installed, so let's see if you guys can see this. I brought my accelerator pump just past that slot in there, and I'm acting like the linkage rod. So you got a nice squirt. And that's what you want. If you're not getting a good squirt like that, you're going to get a bog. You know, because when this carburetor goes from, you know, it's idle through its transition slot, and it opens up, it wants to get fuel from this main metering system, and there's a delay. There's a delay for these venturis to start reacting to pull fuel out of these main nozzles, and that's where the accelerator pump picks up that slack. It throws some fuel down there to pick up that delay. But like I say, it's you know, before you put all that top and everything on it, you know, go out there and install on your car, you know, fuel up the bowl, and test this accelerator pump system, and make sure it's working before you start putting the lid and everything on. These are, you know, simple systems, but you know, this stuff, you know, these kits and stuff you get, you got to do your homework on this stuff to make sure you've got the right parts. You know, most people wouldn't know that there's different size accelerator pumps for these AFBs, but they are, and you know, because a lot of times you'll get these AFBs like this one here. Fortunately, had the tag on it with the number, so I know when I got the kit, you know, I know I was getting it correct for the carb. Most of the AFBs, they were putting the number down here on this pad on the base, and but some of them they just relied on that tag, you know, kind of like you know, GM 4GCs. You know, without that tag, you don't even know what carburetor you're dealing with, and you want to find out what carb you're dealing with and what application you're using it for, because you want to make sure it's jetted correctly for the application. You know, I restore all these carburetors, I replate everything, and throttle shaft bushings and all that stuff if they're needed. Most of the time on AFBs, they got such a big bearing surface on their throttle shafts, you don't have to do it. Quadrajets, yeah, you run into that a lot. But this is something you guys can do at home. I put these videos out. You know, I want guys to go out in the garage and, you know, turn the wrenches and you know, figure this stuff out, redo it yourself. You don't have to send it to me. You know, these aren't brain surgeries. I mean, if you want them to look this way, that's fine. But this is all eye candy. You know, all this plating work and stuff. It doesn't make the carburetor perform any better. I mean, this thing can look like $1 million, but if it doesn't function right, you know, it's pointless. But anyways, I thought this video would help a lot of guys that are having problems with these accelerator pump systems. If any of you guys ever work on Rochester 2 barrels, 2 GCs, 2 jets they call them, they have an accelerator pump system that has a check ball, and it fits down underneath the venturis that screw down. It has check ball spring and a little T deal that drives in. And when you get the kits for those, I'll guarantee that that spring they give you with it is too long. And people will install that spring. It's too tight. The accelerator pump can't put enough pressure to get it off the seat quick enough, and you get a big bog. You know, your accelerator pump ain't putting a good shot out. And what you can do is take those springs, either see if the factory spring was the original one, it'll be shorter. If not, clip that clip that spring down on those 2Gs and until you get a good accelerator pump action. But hey, I hope this video helps you guys out. Quit pulling your hair out. And if you got any questions, just shoot them to me. But just remember, I get this stuff from Mike's Carburetor. Real good website. Got a lot of data on measurements of these accelerator pumps. Sells all the springs and metering rods, all kinds of stuff.